This is Bonjour Chai, the Woke Mediocrity Edition. I'm Avi Fongold in Montreal, and I'm here with Phoebe Maltbovi in Toronto. We are your Frozen Chosen. On today's show, we are tackling the topic of Jews' roles in society. Are we disappearing? Are we looking at the right metrics? We talk to Rabbi Chaim Strauchler to find out. And Phoebe and I get into her review of David Bernstein's new book, Woke Anti-Semitism. Phoebe, how's it going?
All right. How are you doing, Avi? Have a good Purim?
I'm good. I'm recovering. We had quite the shindig. We were recording this on Wednesday, so last night was quite the soiree at our home. We have always like a big Purim meal, and it's sort of like a drop-in sort of thing. We went all out. I grilled flatbreads. We made all sorts of skewers of stuff, and it's kind of fun. But that means that made for a rough morning today.
Oh dear. And any interesting acid trips since last week to tell us about?
No, but the amount of people that are have approached me and listen, if you need some, I have a source and it's good stuff and it's real. And I can't tell you about my I want to tell you about my brother who does this and my cousin who does that, and he's a psychologist with this or that. It's kind of interesting that people come out of the woodwork when psychedelic use gets mentioned and discussed.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just that you're imagining them coming out of the woodwork literally because of the...
No, I am not. Yes, because I have extensive experience with the use of psychedelics. Maybe next year we'll have a Purim trip to speak of, but not this year. This year was purely cocktails.
Any good ones?
When you're hosting 30 to 50 people, it's hard to make cocktails to order, shake cocktails for everybody. So I tend to go the batched route. So I made a punch, and then I made a big batch of Negronis that I stuck in the freezer and just let it go. As people just pour for themselves. I did make a really interesting cocktail. I got asked by the Jewish Journal of Los Angeles for a Purim cocktail because they found out about me through a colleague, and I came up with a cocktail called Esther's Revenge. And it was what's the type of drink that Esther would use to make sure that Haman's downfall would be assured, right? And so it involved this weird syrup that I made with all sorts of spices from the region and Iraq and all the things that I thought that she might have there. And then I finished the cocktail with garnish with 11 raisins on a 50 cubit cocktail pick.
Wow.
Because it's designed to symbolize Haman and his 10 sons who were then hung from the gallows. And it's a nice little fun line there. You can go check out the entire recipe at the Jewish Journal of Los Angeles. We can put a link in the show notes. But they were nice enough to publish a cocktail. What's been on your mind? What have you been? Do you have Purim memorable moments?
I have no thoughts about Purim at all, other than that it sounds like a lot of excitement was had. But
yes,
I did write about something this week. Yes, trad wives. I have a few thoughts about trad wives because I read. So this isn't my nachas. This is my. Just chit-chat about what's happening in the world a little bit, which is that apparently there are some women on TikTok who are trad wife influencers. And there was this really, really compelling interview with one of them.
So hold on. What's a trad wife?
Don't worry. I'm getting to that. I didn't know, and I'm still not entirely sure. But basically, there are women who are stay-at-home wives. They do not necessarily have children, and they are generally, I believe, in the United States, and they are social media influencers who post about videos and so forth about, their lives where they, out of their understanding of tradition, stay at home and serve their husbands and do not work for pay. And there was this really compelling interview with one of them in The Spectator by Cara Kennedy. Cara Kennedy is a journalist, not a trad wife. The trad wife is Estee Williams. And yeah, it just it was a a really interesting interview, but then it just had me thinking about this concept of a trad wife and wondering whether there's anybody Jewish in that world. And I Googled it, and the only person who came up was the person who I had also thought about, who's Abby Shapiro, the American political pundit, right-wing pundit, Ben Shapiro's sister. So she's apparently a trad wife influencer, although she doesn't use the term trad wife, but basically somebody who posts videos, selfies, and so forth in the name of traditional values, but promoting modesty. So where this gets relevant for our purposes is I wrote about this, and then a ton of people replied with like, of course there are Jewish trad wife influencers. Of course. I'm like, okay, tell me, who are they? And some people did come through, and it seems like there's a whole world out there that we may one day explore.
I'm assuming these are the women that like sew their children's Purim costumes from scratch and make like their own gefilte fish and things along those lines. Is that like the trad, meaning like it's a return to tradition, right?
Yes. I don't know if that's what they're doing. Because that's the thing, is it seems like it doesn't seem like this specific kind of homesteader aesthetic is necessarily something that observant Jewish women who are influencers, who do exist, are doing.
I think that my sense is that probably Jews tend to be urban because of the need to be closer to community and closer to Jewish resources. And the women that would be like enticed by this idea of becoming a trad wife probably want to live in large communities where they can have access to resources that they might otherwise not have access to when they're living on the farms. And I think that there has been a specific like move away from country living for Jews, where you used to have Jews all up and down like the prairies and the American Midwest, like all these tiny towns had a shul or had something. And we are moving into increasingly urbanized religion and religious communities. And, that there's an interesting dichotomy there, maybe some sort of tension.
For
sure. Let's hold on to that. I think that there's ideas here, and let's explore that a little bit more, maybe in a future episode.
I hope so. Yeah.
I read your review of David Bernstein's new book, Woke Anti-Semitism, and he's been a guest on the show in the past. Tell us what your thought was about the book, like without getting too much into the review itself. But I had some thoughts.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to read the review. No. So basically I came at this book as somebody who is sympathetic to the argument that there is left-wing anti-Semitism and that left-wing anti-Semitism often gets overlooked. And I also think that sort of the excesses of whatever you want to call it, call-out culture, cancel culture, social justice culture, whatever you want to call it. Like, I think I'm sympathetic to these arguments. But then this book was just very frustrating on that front, because the point of the book was ostensibly that sort of the progressive excesses are bad for Jews, bad both in the sense of anti-Semitism getting overlooked in the kind of David Baddiel Jews don't count sense, where progressive activists and the like don't consider anti-Semitism as one of the isms to worry about. But also the book is about so-called wokeness within Jewish communal organizations, and how, in Bernstein's view, it has really been a bad thing for these organizations. So fine, that's an argument and all that. But then there are all these personal anecdotes, which I think are meant to make it a more colorful story, and do in some ways. But then there were a couple that just kind of had me pause and wonder what the whole point of the endeavor was. One involving Bernstein's first ever encounter with political correctness as such, a woman with a PC pin. And he writes about this woman's hair, a Jewish woman at a Hillel convention, like a fellow college student. He was a college student at the time, who he talks about her frizzy hair in a way that I think in another context would probably be not so nice. So anyway, I'd like the record to state right now, even though it's an audio medium, that Phoebe's brown hair is perfectly coiffed. Definitely.
So
yes,
you cannot catch me out on this.
I have styled it because nobody will know. I have styled it especially for this podcast. That is why it looks definitely not like I just rolled out of bed. But
absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, it just that's basically the gist.
Interesting. So first of all, I don't know that like anti-Semitism on the left is not like called out. I see that called out all the time. Maybe because the community that I happen to be in tends to be much more right-wing, and they're very happy to call out whatever anti-Semitism they see on the left. So I don't think that it's something that is not getting attention. I think that the problem often is just as much the fact that the establishment of the established Jewish community doesn't want to recognize that there is anti-Semitism on the right. Right. To me, a great example of that is when the Conservative Party recently, there were members that met with like avowed anti-Semite. And there was like a real downplaying of it. There was like, yes, this shouldn't happen. But from the establishment Jewish community, it was like, yeah, let's move on, because the Conservative Party, for a lot of people, is the party that they want to vote for, and, you know, whatever it is. And that there's a lot of downplaying. We see this in American politics. We see this in Canadian
politics. So I don't
think
think you see that in American.
People on the right.
No, I think that's where it's different. I think it's because most American Jews are Democrats, to the point that I think there's just this sense that the left is the safer side. That's one piece.
Yeah.
And the other piece is that Jewish nonprofits, like David Bernstein writes, will have very sort of progressive, you know, like recent college grad type people who are, you know, like shaping the culture. I don't think that that's, I think it's probably a bit of this is a bit of a Canada-US divide.
Yeah. So the first thing, like I said, I tend to disagree with him that I think that there is anti-Semitism on both sides.
That I agree with you.
When you really are looking to call out the anti-Semitism on one, you're essentially looking to mask the fact that there's anti-Semitism on both sides of the aisle, and that's a significant problem. And then it sounds like everything else that he seems to be talking about is his problem with wokeness in general, and he just maps that onto the Jewish community. And it really has little, from what I've read of the review, I did not read the book, but we have had him on the show, and I know sort of where his politics lie. It sounds a lot like he's just kind of pushing back against woke culture and mapping that onto the Jewish world, but it doesn't have anything specifically Jewish to attach itself to.
I'm really glad you bring that up, because that I think is really at the center of the issue with the argument of the book. So I found there were that thing about the woman's hair and another thing about women seemed just a bit off-putting, especially because, you know, half of Jews are women. And happy International Women's Day to all who celebrate from a day late. But basically, but no, exactly what you're saying. Like, there are parts of the book that are about sort of trans issues or just like sort of hypersensitivity in schools or whatever, that just seem like, okay, these are these sort of buzzwords, but they have nothing to do with Jews. They have nothing to do with anti-Semitism. They have everything to do with the fact that, you know, Bernstein has whatever politics he has, which, you know, is his right. But like, it just didn't seem to have anything to do with Jews. And I wasn't clear on why Jews as such should care. You know what I mean? Like that just didn't
I've mentioned this in the past. The
me.
Same way that I have a hard time with people who make any issue a Jewish issue to like show, remember, like you shoehorn whatever topic you're loving and you're interested in and say, see, this is in Judaism also, and they find some way to do it. I have a hard time with people who are looking to call out X culture and call it out from within the Jewish community without recognizing the fact that not everything is about Judaism. Right. And I'm not saying to the exclusion that there are definitely some trans issues that definitely significantly do impact and relate to the Jewish community in a real meaningful way. But not everything trans has to do with the Jewish community. Not everything about racism has to do with the Jewish community. There are things that are not necessarily in our, you know, big tent, and we should just leave those alone, and you should attack them as, you know, whatever it is that you don't like, but just leave the Jews out of it sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think this also comes up in terms of, because all of these issues, right, they could impact people who happen to be Jewish, but are they Jewish issues as such? Not necessarily. And if you want to make that case, you have to actually, make that case. And I think there's this danger, and I saw this also ages ago when I reviewed Barry Weiss's book about anti-Semitism. This was kind of an issue as well, where people want to make Jews these kind of symbols of liberal democracy. And, you know, if you're pro-liberal, you're pro-Jewish. If you're pro-Jewish, you're pro-liberal in the like classical liberal sense. And I think that like my version of like what it means to fight anti-Semitism would be fighting the idea that Jews are an abstraction and some sort of symbol of ideas in the broader culture. No, Jews are ourselves. We have our own many, you know, different ways of being Jewish, but this is not like to be a symbol for broader society isn't something we should encourage. if that makes sense.
Meaning that we're not the lens by which we should see everything.
Well, more just meaning that, like, you should support Jews because Jews are people, not that you should support Jews because Jews are canaries in the coal mine for liberal democracy.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that one also. I think that, like, there's been a lot of other canaries in coal mines that we choose to ignore, but as soon as it becomes our canary, then we're going to, like, wave the flag and say, see, we're in trouble, right? And you know, that's not a good look, right? That the only canary that I care about is the canary that's mine. Good pun there. I think sometimes you just have to be and do your thing as a Jew, however that is, and move on, and don't feel like you are the ultimate lens or the ultimate apotheosis for all of Western civilization. And when that happens sometimes, and we see that happening, then that's a problem. And I don't know. That's my thought on it.
And my hunch is you would probably have a whole different set of issues with the book.
Issues with his book? Yeah, probably. Yeah. Maybe I'll get around to reading it. I'll put it on my stack. The review enough was interesting, and my stack gets larger and larger every day. But, you know,
But you are a person of the book, right?
I am a person of the book. Absolutely. On to our main interview with Rabbi Chaim Strauchler right after we hear from our sponsor.
During World War II, the Nazis began a little-known program of extermination for their own children. In Peter Klenott's new mystery thriller, The Unwanted, 14-year-old Hannah Ziegler is being driven by her grandfather and her psychiatrist to a euthanasia center. 16-year-old Silke Hartenstein graces the cover of Nazi propaganda magazines. Avi Kreisler is a Munich police detective rounded up for Dachau. And a patrician father hopes his son David McAuliffe will be elected the first Catholic president of the United States. In The Unwanted, in the aftermath of war, revenge brings these four people together in ways unimaginable. The Unwanted. Do not skip to the last page. Find it at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
For several decades, Jews were used to seeing books with titles like Great Jews in Sports, Great Jews in the Arts, or other similar, books. These often served as bar mitzvah gift fodder or an opportunity to kvel a bit about our achievement in society. But in a short piece for the Jewish journal Tradition, Chaim Strauchler points out that these books have all but disappeared and wonders what it might mean for the Jewish community that we no longer collectively celebrate our achievements. With us to talk about this is the author of the article. Chaim Strauchler is the rabbi of Congregation Rinat Yisrael in Teaneck, New Jersey, and a former contributor to the CJN when he was the rabbi of Shari Shemayim in Toronto. Chaim, welcome to Bonjour Chai.
Thank you. Thank you, Avi. Thank you, Phoebe.
So, one of the things you started in your piece is that for a long time we were quick to point out greatness in the community, but we're easily willing to disregard various misdeeds. And so, I found that this resonated with me a lot because I think a lot about the tension between the message we receive about being the chosen people and the fact that there's a large share of people who don't act in a chosen manner. Right? So how do we accept and move forward, right, as a Jewish community with the possibility that Jews might be a normal people, right, that you have to choose to be chosen, so to speak?
I think it's a great question, Avi, and there is, I think, a certain defensive posture that we take as a people in light of the history of anti-Semitism. And in the article, I speak about two types of anti-Semitism: more than anti-Semitism and less than anti-Semitism. And for much of our people's history, there was what we'd call less than anti-Semitism, namely that we were seen by our haters as being somehow subhuman, somehow less than others. And so in that environment, we were very quick to promote ourselves almost as a collective defense to say, Jews can do that too. We also have baseball players. We also have actors. We also have politicians. And that was seen as being a ways to both promote ourselves in the eyes of others, but honestly, more importantly, inside ourselves, that we were protecting some piece of our soul in some way. And I think that what we're finding today is that there's a different type of anti-Semitism, which is becoming, you might say, even dominant, which is more than anti-Semitism. And this type of anti-Semitism says that the Jews somehow are all powerful. They control this, that, and the other. And within that context, to be able to have a book saying great Jews in X, Y, or Z would be almost like a threat to our people's existence if we were to promote such books, because we don't want to be so special anymore. We don't want to be great. We want to be just, we're not so privileged. We're not so out of the ordinary. And that's, I think, a signal to something which reflects, you might say, that this chosenness problem that many of us feel today. And that is that to be a Jew is to be part of something with it, which is a great story, a great destiny that we have as a people. And the question of how we achieve that destiny, whether it's something that we achieve by being different or whether we achieve that destiny by being aligned with general society, is an ongoing challenge that we have to face as a people.
I find that that tension right there is very much still hovering in the background of so many of the discussions that we have, in that we have attempted to be normalized by society for so long, that the second that we were, or as soon as we were, and we started feeling anti-Semitism, we needed to push back and reminded people that we were still other. And that tension that you speak of is at the heart of where that is, in that, are we really part of the community and say there are great Jews in sports? Really, we're part of it. There are artists, as you said, all of this stuff. But then as soon as there are problems within from general society to the Jewish community, we like to remind people, no, hold on a second, right? We're not like you, right? And when somebody hates us, it's not like you're hating just another person, you're hating an entire group and that they were a minority and all that. And it's almost like we succeeded too well, right? And I wonder if you've thought about this, right? That what happens, right? The unintended consequence of succeeding too well, that when the anti-Semitism comes up, right, there's a problem there.
So I think you're bringing up an interesting point, which is a bit of nuance in what we're facing. And that is that I think that when we become integrated, and then we still face hatred, I think there's almost an expectation that the hatred would somehow have stopped if once we become normalized, and that we almost want to be normalized to a certain extent. And when hatred then comes and says that, hey, you're not going to be, outsmarting anti-Semitism, this thing that has existed for our people for millennia, is not going to be solved with great Jews in books. That somehow, even within Western society, even with the advent of a Jewish nation state, that somehow anti-Semitism is still hanging around, is a little bit of a shock. And we do have to confront anti-Semitism and make clear that we too are being hated here, and that hatred has all sorts of manifestations which are in no way worse, and in many respects far worse than other forms of hatred that exist today. And so we do have to put that out there, but I think we put it out there reluctantly, that there was almost this hope going back a generation that really never again would be never again. That somehow, if we educated everyone about the Holocaust, if we put out enough books that said, hey, the Jews are not less than, that we are just like everybody else who do contribute to this world, then they would stop hating us. It hasn't worked. So,
in a sense, though, what you're saying is that we try to not be an other, and will always be an other, and that is... I'm okay with that, though, right? I'm okay with always being an other, right? Because I think that every group is always an other, right? We're always an other to somebody else, and you might be the dominant, but you are often a minority in something, right? If you say to yourself, who are the Muslims in the world? Well, they're a minority of the global population. Christians are a minority in certain societies. Jews are a minority in a lot of other societies. And the fact remains that the hatred is not, there is a particular anti-Semitism that's there, but the problem that needs to be fixed is hating other minorities or others in any given society. And that's not a distinctly Jewish problem. That's just a problem that society has.
So you're suggesting that anti-Semitism is one type of hatred among other hatreds.
Yeah, I sort of do think that, and I'm not sure that there is a uniqueness that groups that hate other groups will always be finding minorities to hate. And right, it didn't work, as you said, and I agree that it doesn't work to normalize, to say that we're going to be as part of this dominant culture, because you're always going to be an other. And there always will be others in society. We don't look for like a hegemonic group of people in this world. We look to, and we celebrate diversity, right? You might be from New Jersey, you're back in New Jersey, but you have to remember that we believe in the multicultural aspects of our society in Canada, not the melting pot aspects of society. And so, in order to celebrate multiculturalism, though, you have to be willing to accept others, and that anti-Semitism is just one hatred amongst many. Yeah.
So I would just add that the history of Western society, and you might say the hopefulness of generations ago, the thing is the John Lennon song Imagine. Mm-hmm. There was sort of this hopefulness that eventually difference could disappear, and that whatever otherness there was would not have to lead to division and hatred. And the society in which we live is not. It's almost reached the point where, like you're saying, that there's always going to be this otherness in one way or another, and that's something which is of great concern to us. But I think also on a historical level, there is something about the otherness of the Jew which is distinct among the various types of othernesses that have existed within history. And you're almost like trying to normalize anti-Semitism. We can't normalize the Jews, so we'll normalize anti-Semitism. And that's, Jews are no different, or anti-Semitism is no different. But even there, I think that there's something about just how anti-Semitism finds a way to morph. Even this morph from less than anti-Semitism to more than anti-Semitism. It's just, there's something about this thing that is almost beyond other stories. And if I'm going to put like sort of a religious layer onto this, I mean, we are the Shabbos after Shabbos Zachor, and we are right after Purim. But that you might say that there's something metaphysical about anti-Semitism in terms of whenever a group or any person tries to disturb an equilibrium, there's going to also often be a reaction against it. And that when the Jews come into the world and we are here to do something, we're not just here to be like everybody else. That when we represent the ideas of the Torah, as we represent the ideas of ethical monotheism and tzedek and mishpat and so on, there's going to be a reaction against that. And you might say that anti-Semitism is that reaction to a certain degree. And in finding a theological way to approach this metaphysical impossibility that somehow whatever we do, there's no way to stop this hatred. I think that there's something hopeful in recognizing that it's a function of who we are in a way that validates our mission, in a way that once again differentiates us from within the human story.
So first of all, I loved your article. It was really interesting. And the way that Jews has a tendency to claim as Jews anybody with even a really tenuous connection to Jewishness, and more specifically to kind of claim anybody an anti-Semite would consider a Jew, and not to think about whether people are not even just halakhically Jewish, but whether they consider themselves Jewish in any way, shape, or form. And this came up fairly recently, in the last couple of years, when the Forward claimed Ella Emhoff as a Jew, and then she or her representative said something like, no, actually she's not Jewish. Her father is Jewish, but she does not consider herself to be Jewish, and he only apparently got involved in his Jewishness after when she was no longer living in the same home as he was. So I was just wondering whether how much there is or should be a shift away from that way of defining Jewishness within the Jewish community.
Phoebe, I think that's a great question. And I think there's a whole, a cultural piece, both internal to our community and also outside our community, where people try to claim Jews or to take on a certain story to legitimize who we are.
There's a website, actually. I don't know if you know about this. There's a website called isjewish.com. And I discovered this recently. And you can type in somebody's name and they just tell you, like, and I don't think it's exhaustive or comprehensive, but it's like they just tell you, is this person Jewish or not, based on, you know, liberal Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, which parent is Jewish, which parent is not. And it falls into very much exactly what we're saying here.
It's that the Adam Sandler Hanukkah song, right?
Exactly.
That whole thing. It's a... we have to ask ourselves, why do we do this? Why do we play that game? Why is that something which is so important to us? And I think that comes back to a certain degree to our desire to claim people as being part of the us. And in being able to pick out the various stars of this world and say, well, they're one of us. Well, that makes for us that much bigger and makes us feel more special. But I wonder the degree to which this is a thing in this upcoming generation. I very much think that in past generations, the idea of claiming Jews off of waivers, to utilize the sports metaphor, was something that was very, very important. But I think that the trend which I'm finding in the lack of publications of the whole Jews in genre, I think we're going to find something similar when it comes to this claiming Jews off waivers phenomenon as well. That there's going to become less of a need for us to be playing that game. I don't think the game means as much as it once did. And I think also, as I mentioned in the article, there's a certain problem to playing the game only one way. When you're only looking for people on the up, and you're not taking claims to responsibility for them on the way down. Because there are plenty of Jews who've done horrible things. And the degree to which we as a community take ownership for our criminals. And I'm not talking about the Jewish gangsters, that somehow being a gangster is somehow not a problem in today's ethics. But I mean like the real problematic people.
So I did have a question about that exactly, because I thought that was so interesting, the idea that you can't take credit for the good Jews without sort of taking blame for the bad ones. But I was wondering, when people take credit for Jewish success, do you think in like this Jews in type of framework, there's any implication that their Jewish identity, values, past, background, whatever, played a role in their success? Or do you think it's just sort of like a coincidence? You know what I mean? Because what you're writing about in terms of Jews who've acted badly, it's like sort of where did we go wrong kind of thing. But do you think that with the Jewish success, there's a where did we go right? Or do you think it's just kind of like, isn't it neat that this person's, you know, great grandfather was Jewish and they have a Jewish last name?
I think it's a combination. I think it's for each person it's different. And I think for a lot of people, it's just, oh, isn't that cute? I think that there's a lot of our identity which comes from collective linking. And so if a person feels that like their Jewish identity is somehow a signal of being less than, so if you see a great Jew do great things, like winning Nobel Prizes or, you know, winning MVP awards, whatever that might be, you feel like, okay, you know, I'm up in the world. But even like in sub-communities that this also plays out, the phenomenon around the YU basketball team last year, and them winning all those 50 games in a row, whatever it was. That there also, that even within the modern Orthodox world, there was a certain feeling of, okay, now we can play basketball too.
Well, that's what just one quick question about that is, do you think it's different if the Jews in, do you think it's different if it's in something like sports where there's a stereotype that Jews would not be in it, as versus something like Nobel Prize winning, where I think the stereotype at this point would be that Jews are, you know, overrepresented or, you know, represented beyond our numbers or whatever in that? Like, do you think it matters? Because I'm also thinking that, like,
Phoebe's dancing around the fact that there's no book called Great Jews in Business.
Well, that is literally my notes. Okay, so literally, Avi, you're going to laugh, but like literally my note to myself for this very interview was that you don't ever see a list like in a Jewish publication. In other contexts you would, of like Jewish bankers, right? You do not see like, you know, top Jews in banking as like something a Jewish publication. Now, an anti-Semitic person might make such a list and publicize that, but that would not be. So yeah, that was, yes, Avi, exactly. Great minds.
I always think about the quote from Ben Gurion that Israel is never going to really be a real nation, not just until we have, you know, the Jewish this and the Jewish that, but then he quotes the Jewish thieves and the Jewish prostitutes, right? That's when we'll know we'll have a Jewish nation, right? And you know, when you bring in this idea of misdeeds, you know, you stop and think for a second, why shouldn't we own this fact? If we want it to be normalized, if we really wanted to be part of like general society, we should say, of course, we have criminals. Our criminals are the best criminals, right? And yet we shy away from that. Of course we have criminals, but we don't say that because we have shame. Right. And it goes deeply to this sort of, you know, pride and shame in who we are as a nation. And I think that that's not just rational and being able to say more than or less than. I think that that goes really to like familial roots where you don't want to talk about the brother that's, you know, did something wrong, but you rarely want to write them out.
Isn't there that expression like ashanda for the goy? Is this not an expression?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think this is really about the construction of identity and how each of us makes our own self, utilizing Judaism as one ingredient in terms of how we bring that in. And we want that Judaism to have a certain color, have a certain meaning for our own purposes, that I should feel a certain pride, a certain sense of, you know, I'm a good person. And the degree to which we whitewash that identity by only including in that concept of my Judaism only the heroes and not the villains. I think that's a bit of a challenge. And now I was sharing this idea with a group a couple of weeks ago, and someone raised their hand and said, "But you know, great or Jewish criminals or not so great Jewish criminals is not going to sell many books." Because people don't.
Oh, I don't know about that. There's several people that have made large careers writing about Jewish criminals.
But like the swashbuckling gangster of yore is different from the Bernie Madoff, right?
Right, exactly.
Like once there's distance enough that you could kind of have a bit of glamour to it as versus just pain.
Exactly. And I think that's really a problem of our literature, in that we have been so much on the defensive for so long that I think we've lost some of that Isaiah, Jeremiah skill, the ability to really bring out our failures and to have communal conversations about that. Because I think that there is a certain piece here of collective identity that we all have to own together. And we have to be able to say, gee, how's our brand doing? And we sort of just say like, you know, don't talk about Bruno. You know, don't talk about Bruno. I don't want to hear about Bruno. And that's...
I hear. But I actually think it's different. I think that the criminals of yore, right, the swashbuckling, as you said, Phoebe, the gangsters of the 30s, there was a lot, from what I've read, there was a lot of pride in their Jewishness. They were, even at the time, and people loved this. Of course, Lansky, he's a Jew, he's one of our people. But Lansky himself took pride in his Jewishness and had a lot of Jewish identity around what he was doing. He was the kind of guy that felt like he could be a criminal and still go to shul. And nowadays, the Madoffs and the other criminal and the Epsteins, right, they are direct. First of all, not only are they sometimes directly doing significant harm to the Jewish community, they are they have so little to do with the Jewish community that there's this pushback away from them.
Didn't Madoff have more to do with the Epstein? Maybe, but I think Madoff was pretty.
But he
not nicely.
Embezzled.
I'm not saying he would. Oh, sure.
I'm saying he embezzled directly, but he wasn't a shul goer. People didn't think of him as this like, hey, we're gonna make you the person of the year for this synagogue or the museum or whatever, the Jewish museum. Nobody was calling him out like this for his philanthropy, for his Judaism in that way, and that is a significant distinction between the Jews on the way down in today's society. What do you think? If you think that this is not necessarily the right way to like work on anti-Semitism and deal with our identity, how do we? What should we be thinking in terms of the future? What would be the ideal sets of books to give bar and bat mitzvah girls, and what's the way to combat anti-Semitism within identity? Thinking about it in the context of these things in your framing.
So I think that we do need a certain Jeremiah, Isaiah type literature that's going to, ask hard questions about what it is that we're not doing well, And again, I'm not sure whether the booksellers are going to be publishing such books, because I'm not sure what the market is for introspection. But we do have a very long legacy of self-critical works. And I think that very often we're not prepared to write these works because we're so embattled. We always feel like, to have that type of introspection puts us at risk. But with a long historical lens, I would question, when has it ever been better to ask these sorts of questions? When have we had it so good that we're able to think self-critically and to engage in conversations about, how it is that we behave relative to one another, relative to Gentiles? And this is a conversation worth having internal to Canada, to the United States, to Israel. These are important questions to be bringing up, and to have a framework by which we're able to say, gee, even if we're not, on the top level criminals on these things, how are we doing with that's making the world a better place? Is that something that we really are doing, or we just say that we're doing that and it doesn't really pan out? And is our performance living up to our publicity?
What about Jewish mediocrities? Because I feel like there are really impressive Jews, and then there are really, evil Jews. But there are also, I almost wonder if one way of pushing back against anti-Semitism that you actually do see is when somebody will talk about, Jews and money, and somebody will be like, I wish, that's kind of a thing, though. And I almost wonder if that's something that people already use and maybe could use as, but then that also has its downsides. You don't want to say, nobody wants to call themselves mediocre, but there are Jews doing everything, including nothing particular.
I'll be the first one to say I'm plenty mediocre.
I'm right there with you, Avi. I'm right there with you. We the podcasters will stand up for the mediocre Jews.
Absolutely.
So I think that there's, I think that in the whole typology of the great Jews who are the buyers of these books? Now, obviously, it's not
bar mitzvah gifts.
Bar mitzvah gifts for Jews
90%,
who will likely one day be mediocre on whatever level. Now, I think in a person's self-perception, the whole celebrity culture in which we're all swimming often means that there's something of great psychological difficulty in accepting the mediocrity in some way. And I think that it would be great if we stopped talking about one another as leaders and started talking about one another as just as souls and people and so on. And I think that the culture of, you're going to save the world. Every bar mitzvah, somehow you're going to change everything. You're going to be a leader. Now, I'm not sure how healthy that is. I think that it's much better to be able to convey to our children and to ourselves that we each have the capacity to do good and to do bad. And I think that's a critical piece in our communal self-perception, to really take stock and ask ourselves, after 30 years or 25 years of a Tikkun Olam narrative, how have we done collectively on that point? I'm not sure how statistically to go about tracking that sort of thing, but I think that we could write a couple of good articles with some good anecdotes and talk to various people about how it's going. And I'm not so sure that we're gonna come out so swimmingly on that one.
The real way to do it, and actually there's a colleague of ours, Avi Orlo. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's very involved in the world of Jewish camp, and he has a few really excellent essays on his website about Jewish followership, and that we've spent so much time and really, probably millions of dollars at this point on Jewish leadership institutes and Jewish leadership and how you can be the next Jewish leaders. And we're not training people that, there are many, many more followers than there are leaders, and you have to be a good follower before you can even think about being a good leader.
I think we do have good Jewish followers out there. I think that often they don't get the attention that they deserve. And I think that I often see this in terms of presiding at funerals and hearing the stories of rank and file Jews who just do good. And not everyone's going to be an influencer. And you're going to have plenty of meaning in life. And I think I'd say the primary meaning of life comes from those simple relationships where you're able to put in a good word, pick up someone's day with a smile and just, help pick people up. And I think that we do share those messages, but we often know we don't share them perhaps at bar and bat mitzvahs. But I certainly hear them at funerals. And those messages really are valuable to be able to say to people that you can live a good life without having millions of followers. It works.
I think that's a beautiful statement to end on. Chaim Strauchler, the rabbi at Rinat Yisrael in Teaneck, New Jersey, just wrote a piece in Tradition magazine about Jews in. And thank you, Chaim, for coming on, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Avi, Phoebe, thank you.
Will you stick around and give us a nachas of the week?
Sure.
Are you in the market for a new watch or a special piece of jewelry? Are you looking for the perfect engagement ring to pop the question? Atelier Lou has all this and more. Eric and the team at Atelier Lou can craft a piece for you, or you can select from some of the exclusive designers that they offer. From a simple bangle to a statement necklace, Atelier Lou can make you or your loved ones sparkle. Located in the heart of Westmount in Montreal or online at atelierlou.com, visit Atelier Lou for your next watch or jewelry purchase. And when you do, make sure to use promo code BON18 for 10% off your next purchase. That's atelierlou.com.
Now time on the show for our nachas. Chaim, what's your nachas this week?
So I want to begin by just saying that around my Shabbos table, I've created a little minhag. Typically, rabbis don't try to create new minhagim, but this is for a family culture sort of thing. And we go around the table every Friday night, right before Kiddush, and we ask everyone, what are you thankful for that happened this week? So I'm not sure it's necessarily a nachas point, but I think that it certainly reflects something of great importance in terms of the importance of gratitude, about feeling, not taking things for granted. So in thinking about what I'm going to be sharing around my table this Friday night, I would say that I get a lot of nachas from my people, from my community. And it comes through in all sorts of different ways. And so I had great nachas on Purim, just being there at my community's Purim Chagiga and seeing the smiles on people's faces, seeing how they interacted with one another, being able to really be misameach as a community. And I think that for me as a rabbi, you get nachas in a slightly different way than, I guess, rank and file. But I think rank and file can also get nachas from this too. Being able to be a part of a healthy environment where people just make each other smile, make each other feel good in a certain togetherness. And those feelings come quite often, but often I think we sort of just pass over them very quickly as we try to muscle in for that little kiddish schnitzel or the bamba or whatever is there on the table. But to be able to take a step back and to feel the room, to feel the noise, to feel the energy of people just living Judaism together. That's my nachas.
Beautiful. Thank you. My nachas this week is very simple. I found a piece of Judaica that is going to be fun. We are thinking already. Purim is behind us. The Seder is ahead of us. Those of you who have been listening for a while, I'm not sure if you heard this, Phoebe, before, but I mentioned this in the past. I do have a thing for very complicated puzzles, like just jigsaw puzzles, which started in the pandemic, and I just didn't want any ordinary ones. I started to find the really hard, difficult ones. There's a Judaica company that does these very cheesy, chintzy Judaica, especially around Passover, where they print matzah on everything, like matzah tablecloth, matzah ties, matzah one-piece bathing suit, stuff like that. But they made a 1,000-piece matzah puzzle.
That sounds so cool.
It is fiend. I imagine it's going to be insanely difficult. But I'm up for the challenge, and I will. I will report back because it is ordered and it is on its way. And when it is done, we will have to clock in. It might be, not before Rosh Hashanah, but there's 1,000 mini pieces of matzah, and we have to put them together.
That is fantastic, and I'm feeling very inspired to go out and order the exact same thing and have. We
should have a race.
Yes, the great matzah puzzle race.
Don't open yours until we both have them in touch. In that, we'll figure this out.
Definitely.
We'll report back to everybody.
That sounds amazing.
Phoebe, what's your nachas this week?
So mine is a New Yorker article by Rachel Aviv called Agnes Callard's Marriage of the Minds.
Oh my God. I read this.
Okay. So
I have so many
she's
thoughts.
Jewish, apparently, Agnes Callard. So we are on topic here. I'm sorry, I cannot make her Canadian as well. I do not have that power vested in me. Oh my goodness, right? It is like it is everything.
Tell everybody the nachas first, and then we can...
yes, it's... It's
what it's about.
Yes. So my nachas is, I suggest reading this article. It's about a philosophy professor and her husband, and then her new husband, and they all live together. And she has interesting notions, and it's just a heck of a ride, that article. Maybe you would have to read it for yourself to get the full picture, but basically it's about the state of marriage today, perhaps as viewed by somebody with both very idiosyncratic and also very sort of, if she were a man, this would maybe none of it be surprising, is maybe...
Well, yeah, so I found it fascinating that this entire discussion ensues about this woman and her relationship and relationships and everything that happened there. And I don't want to get too into it. This is a nachas. This is not for critique. But I found the most fascinating piece of it is like, how do you talk about love when you are a philosopher who is used to analyzing and being incredibly analytic about everything. And then on top of that, the entire side piece of it, which is that they talk about
side piece is well put. Sorry,
autistic.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, it is. That she is autistic, which adds this other element of like analytic and, specific focus. But it blew my mind, the entire, interesting way in like, how do we talk about love when we analyze it, and the feeling versus the analysis. Yes, I highly encourage everybody, please go read this piece. Yeah.
So we both encourage both nachases. What's
Excellent.
plural of nachas?
Nachases, I believe. Yeah. Thank you. This has been a great show as always. Phoebe.
Thanks, Avi.
Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for the week ending March 11th, Shabbat Parashat Ki Tisa. The show is produced and edited by Zach Kaufman. The executive producer for CJN Podcast is Michael Freeman. Our music is by So-Called. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our page at thecjn.ca/bonjour, and you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love it if you told a friend about Bonjour Chai. It's one of the best ways we get new listeners. As always, you can email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca. I'm Avi Feingold.
And I'm Phoebe Maltz-Bovey.